Palace sources say it happened 3 minutes ago. Then it nearly didn't. Because inside the household, someone tried to delay the confirmation until after the next royal ceremony. Just long enough to change who would control the story. Just long enough to soften the impact. Just long enough to keep Charlotte from rising at the exact moment everyone would be watching. But Prince William refused. And that refusal is the real headline. Before we roll the footage, just one thing. If you enjoy our work, drop a like and hit subscribe. Over 98% of you are watching without subscribing. Let's change that right now. It's free for you, but it fuels everything we do. Subscribed? Perfect. Now, enjoy the video. The palace has now confirmed a new title for Princess Charlotte, and it is not decorative. It is structural. It is political. It is a message about where this family is headed next. The announcement was meant to land cleanly. It did not. The words came out fast, tense, and unmistakably heavy. Charlotte did not smile when the title was spoken. She sat beside Catherine, gripping the edge of her chair like she could hold the future in place with her hands. The palace statement named Charlotte as Royal Guardian of the Crown, a phrase that sounds ceremonial until you read it like a constitution. Because guardian is not just symbolism, it signals authority. It signals responsibility. It signals that Charlotte would become George's principal royal support, a visible partner during emergencies, and the public face of selected duties. It also signals that the succession blueprint is being rewritten around the siblings, not above them. And that is exactly why resistance formed at all. Because within minutes, major outlets began reshaping their coverage. BBC reporters refreshed live pages. The Guardian ran first reactions and followed up with quoted experts from constitutional circles. On social media, the phrase "Guardian of the Crown" started trending alongside "spare dynamic" and "future structure." Oxford University historians, speaking in careful interviews, warned that language creates behavior. Titles, one scholar summarized, alter how institutions distribute power. But even that academic framing missed the most chilling detail. The title was not supposed to be confirmed right now. It was supposed to wait. According to people close to the palace, a senior figure inside the household urged postponement until after the next royal ceremony, arguing that Charlotte's announcement would complicate optics. Optics. That word always arrives when someone wants to disguise fear as strategy. The demand was simple. Delay the confirmation and let the ceremony absorb the attention first. Then release Charlotte's news on a calmer cycle. Then reduce the sense of escalation. William refused that plan with a kind of calm that only looks gentle from far away. He saw what delay would do. He knew delay would invite interference. Delay would give opponents a longer runway. Delay would turn a family decision into a palace struggle. Above politics, beyond attack, until now. The palace released the news earlier than planned. Congratulations arrived in orderly waves from official channels. But one senior royal offered nothing. Not a call, not a message, no public word. And that omission hit harder than praise, because it told you who understood the consequences and who chose not to acknowledge them. The truth is, the family did not just gain a title. Several futures quietly rearranged themselves behind the polished statement. George remained first in line. The heir remained the heir. That part was never in question. Yet Charlotte's role would place her beside George in ways that older hierarchies were not designed to absorb. So when people ask what's shocking here, the answer is not, Charlotte got a title. The answer is that the palace had to fight just to say it out loud. William watched his daughter absorb every word. Even from across the room, you could see that he was studying her reaction, like a father reading the emotional weather before storms form. He knew the succession plan. He knew the blueprint for how duties and authority would pass to the next generation. He also knew the part that outsiders missed. The plan did not threaten George's claim. It was meant to protect George's path from isolation. Yet protection, in this family, always comes with a cost. Charlotte's title would create purpose, training, briefings, and emergency responsibility. But it would also remove space for ordinary childhood. Royal children are often praised for strength, while quietly losing freedom to make mistakes. And Catherine looked like someone who understood that trade. Her face showed pride, then fear, then a kind of careful confusion that did not belong in a press room. The palace moved quickly, and a senior aide slid a sealed plan across the table. It was the kind of document that looks harmless until you understand what it authorizes. William opened it, reached the final paragraph, and read those lines twice. Then he nodded, as if confirming not just meaning, but intent. The key shift was inside that cause for Charlotte's appointment. It stated that her role would include training, selected briefings, and a deputy position during national crises. That is not tradition. That is governance by person. It is the monarchy building a contingency structure around a child. Catherine turned toward her husband. Her search for his expression was not about romance. It was about fear. She understood why those words mattered, because she also understood what would follow. A title like this would change schedules, security, and how senior royals interacted with the siblings. It would also change how the press would interpret every smile, every absence, every hesitation. William signed the approval and set the pen down. Then he turned toward Charlotte. His words landed quietly, but the structure behind them was unmistakable. This title was not about standing behind George, it was about standing beside him. And that distinction is where the real strategy lives. Charlotte looked toward Catherine before meeting her father's eyes. She did not look uncertain about duty. She looked uncertain about what duty would cost her personally. Her silence carried more weight than any applause, because the announcement, now released, came on top of something far more delicate, the negotiation that almost derailed it. Before the palace could celebrate, William had to face relatives who understood that Charlotte's rise would quietly rearrange their own futures. Some saw it as progress, others saw it as threat. Either way, the tension was real. In royal politics, the conflict rarely looks like anger. It looks like withheld warmth. It looks like careful distance. It looks like someone suddenly busy when you expect them to be supportive. One person close to the discussion later described it as a family balancing act inside a national spotlight. George heard the truth before the public announcement reached the public, and that alone tells you how tightly the plan was controlled. William explained that George's position as heir would not change. Charlotte would simply receive training beside him and act as deputy if needed. The boy listened, then looked directly at his sister. "Does this mean you always have to follow me?" he asked. Charlotte did not answer quickly. Catherine watched her daughter think, while William remained silent, like a man refusing to rush the most important conversation. Then Charlotte shook her head. "I don't want your crown," she said. "I just don't want you to face it alone." That sentence is why this feels more than ceremonial. It is why palace observers are calling it a pivot, not a promotion. The title did not create competition. It created partnership language. Yet partnership language still triggers old wounds, especially in a monarchy that has long been haunted by the idea of the spare. William then admitted the deeper reason. He feared that the painful spare dynamic, where one child's future is defined by distance from the throne, would shape these siblings' relationship instead of protecting it. He wanted to prevent Charlotte from being pushed into the shadows, pushed into serving as a symbol, pushed into competing for relevance. That is what made Catherine immediately understand the danger. She supported giving Charlotte purpose, but she refused to let the title swallow childhood. She feared the palace would treat the siblings as a narrative machine before they learned who they were outside duty. George heard it as support, Catherine heard it as risk, and Charlotte, watching her parents absorb the implications, heard it as a question of identity. The plan's designers also knew something else. Several advisors had proposed separating the children's training pathways. George would receive constitutional preparation. Charlotte would receive a more limited public role. William rejected that suggestion. He rewrote the framework himself. And that detail is crucial. It confirms that this was not merely a palace decision handed down by committee. It was a father redesigning his children's lives with a specific fear in mind, weakening both siblings by splitting them into parallel stories. Later, George crossed the room and offered Charlotte his hand. She took it. William looked toward Catherine, and the exchange between father and mother felt like a silent confession, relief and fear, and the knowledge that the world would now try to interpret every gesture. Because that quiet gesture mattered more than the palace announcement itself. It followed a ceremony, where the family's hidden fears erupted into the open. 6 months earlier, during a royal ceremony designed to support young people across Commonwealth nations, one unexpected absence left George exposed in front of hundreds of guests. The event was scheduled carefully. George had prepared his first formal address at St. George's Hall for the Commonwealth Youth Service. William was supposed to stand beside him. Charlotte and Louis were meant to remain close, supportive but not central. Then Charles suffered a sudden spell of exhaustion, and William was taken aside for an urgent update. The program could not wait. Guests were already watching. Officials were whispering. And George, who had spent weeks preparing, suddenly realized his father would not be beside him when he stepped forward. The boy froze near the entrance. His hands trembled. His breathing became shallow. Fear, in that moment, looked like a physical condition. Charlotte noticed before courtiers could intervene. Officials later described it as instinct. Catherine tried to reach them, but security and event staff rearranged paths, blocking her movement for tense seconds. Then Charlotte stepped closer to George and lowered her voice. "You only have to take the first step," she told him. George looked at her, then toward the doorway. She walked beside him until the final moment. She stayed close enough that fear could find her whenever it returned. The address continued. What senior officials had expected to collapse stayed intact. The ceremony survived because a child with no assigned responsibility had created stability through her presence. William returned and understood immediately what had happened. George completed the address, but William's attention kept returning to Charlotte. Her calm had protected her brother without stealing the moment. And for a family trying to avoid rivalry, that balance is everything. Afterward, William requested the original succession support framework. The private plan was supposed to define how the heir and his siblings would prepare for future duties. What he discovered was alarming. Charlotte had no clear path, no structured training, no protection from being pushed into the shadows, no plan for what would happen if she were exposed before she was ready. That's the moment the title stopped being about prestige. It became about emergency prevention. So when William placed Charlotte's future before the family, the confrontation began. Not in a committee, not in a press room. It began behind closed doors, inside a private palace sitting room, where Queen Camilla challenged the most powerful clause in the succession plan. She warned William that a new title could create confusion. It could provoke comparisons. The monarchy, she implied, was not prepared to manage the public and institutional consequences. William did not raise his voice. He closed the folder. He looked across the table. He made it clear that his daughter's future was no longer negotiable. Camilla pushed the succession folder back toward him anyway. Her argument was subtle but sharp. She said the role could appear to bypass senior working royals, Anne, Edward, Sophie, people who had spent years carrying duties for Charles. William kept one hand on the folder. He answered that Charlotte's role was not a judgment on anyone serving the king. It was designed for the monarchy George would inherit. A smaller institution, he argued, could not afford to leave the heir isolated, or the sister without a clear purpose. Camilla's voice softened, but tension sharpened. She asked if Charlotte was old enough to carry the expectation. William heard concern, but he also sensed something else, an instinct to protect an existing hierarchy that his plan would quietly reshape. Then Camilla crossed a line. She suggested that Catherine's influence had made the proposal too personal, turning a constitutional decision into a mother's attempt to elevate her daughter. William's expression changed instantly. He warned Camilla not to reduce Charlotte's ability or Catherine's intention to ambition. His wife had argued for caution, not power, and he would not allow restraint to be twisted into manipulation. Camilla revealed more than she intended. In that private conversation, she admitted advisors had already asked Charles to delay the title until George reached adulthood. That is how you learn the resistance wasn't limited to one room. It was already structured. It was already planned. The title was about more than family dynamics. It was about controlling timing. It was about controlling narrative. It was about controlling who gets to define the future structure of the monarchy before the public has a chance to react. Camilla pushed the folder again and framed it as simple change. The family had already changed. The plan simply admitted it. William slid the folder back toward himself, and then he disclosed the most destabilizing fact. Charles had privately approved the principle months earlier. That meant the only authority left was William's consent as Charlotte's father and the future sovereign. Camilla fell silent. Moments later, the Queen Consort requested a private meeting with Charles. The hope was obvious. Convince the king to soften or suspend the decision. Maybe the threat would be reversed. Maybe the title could be contained. Maybe Charlotte's authority could be reduced to something more manageable. But the confrontation ended with William holding the document again. The final balance of power still rested with one man, whose signature could turn a family decision into royal history. King Charles understood this wasn't about one child. Approving Charlotte's title meant accepting William's vision of the monarchy before Charles's own reign had fully closed its chapters. Rejecting it could fracture the future king's confidence. It could leave George without the support structure William believed essential. Charles studied two versions of the proposal in silence. One followed the old model, centered on George. Charlotte would receive a looser public role. The other was William's revised framework, more formal, defining how the next generation would share duty, training, and responsibility. Royal siblings without clear purpose, Charles understood, had often been pushed into rivalry or resentment or confusion, and William knew the pain of unchosen distance. It touched older wounds, including the painful distance between himself and Harry, a story the British public has never stopped dissecting. But this time, William did not ask for permission like a son pleading. He spoke like a future sovereign, defining what he expected to inherit. The room changed tone. Charles heard respect, but he also heard the authority of someone ready to rewrite the monarchy's emotional architecture. Then Charles disclosed a private memory from years earlier, from a documented conversation with Queen Elizabeth. Elizabeth's warning echoed through the silence. Future royal daughters should never be treated as secondary, simply because tradition had failed to imagine a larger role for them. The clause that mattered was not just about duties, it was about dignity. Charles finally approved the constitutional language that gave Charlotte a recognized place within the future royal structure. But he added one condition: her education, childhood, and personal freedom had to remain protected until adulthood. William agreed immediately. So the title was sealed. The pen had been signed. The future was drafted. Yet the moment the palace began rearranging duties, the human cost became visible. Before the announcement reached the public, Charlotte's new title already changed rooms, schedules, and relationships. Advisors rewrote future ceremony plans. Security officials expanded her protection arrangements. Senior royals learned that certain responsibilities they expected to retain would eventually transfer to the next generation. But the most revealing reaction came not from an advisor or constitutional expert. It came from Charlotte herself. She discovered a tradition had already been altered because of a title she never requested. Her new long-term training schedule covered constitutional history, diplomacy, charitable leadership, and duties linked to George. Constitutional training meant learning how official decisions are handled and how a royal supports the crown during difficult moments. Future state occasions were adjusted so she would stand closer to George, signaling unity without implying competition. Then the first personal cost arrived. Charlotte learned that her next private school event would include extra protection officers. She would no longer enter quietly. Familiar routines would be controlled by security protocols. She closed her bedroom door as if she could keep the title inside it. Then she opened it again almost immediately when Catherine called her name. Catherine found her daughter alone, holding an official briefing card, like it could vanish if she stared hard enough. Charlotte asked whether the title meant everything ordinary had to disappear. Catherine sat beside her daughter on the floor and told her duty must fit around humanity, not erase it. William heard what happened and acted at once. The future king ordered security officials to reduce changes wherever possible. He approved Charlotte's position, but he refused to let palace machinery turn one decision into a complete loss of freedom. And in that moment, the title was revealed for what it truly is. Not captivity, but risk management. Not replacement, but redesign. Aunt delivered the warning with blunt honesty. The Princess Royal told William Charlotte must learn how to refuse attention as firmly as she accepts responsibility. Service without boundaries, she said, can become another form of captivity. William carried those words all day. He cancelled one official meeting, set aside the remaining papers, then decided the next conversation could not be between an heir and a future royal guardian. It had to be between a father and his daughter. That evening, William dismissed the aides. He left the succession papers behind. He asked Charlotte to walk with him alone. No courtiers, no assistants, no palace statement waiting to be approved. For the first time since the plan began, William admitted something rare for a future king. He might have made a decision too large for his daughter. Charlotte listened without interrupting. Then she asked one question that reframed everything. Will George know he can still ask me for help? William stopped. He explained the title would not make Charlotte responsible for every problem George faced. Its purpose was recognition, preparation, and protection if she chose to serve beside him. The role was not a command, it was a path, and she would still have the right to decide how far she wished to follow it. Charlotte kept listening, but her silence carried fear. William promised that no ceremony advisor or royal institution could force her to surrender her personal life. He promised her adulthood would remain hers. Then the future king admitted what truly drove him. He feared repeating the old pattern where one child inherited purpose while another spent years fighting to be noticed. Royal siblings had often been pushed into competition or left feeling abandoned once the heir's path became dominant. William would not let George and Charlotte inherit that wound. Charlotte finally spoke. She said she was not frightened of helping George. She was frightened people would stop seeing her as his sister. She feared they would begin seeing her only as part of the succession. Because the word succession sounds clinical, it sounds like an order, but to Charlotte, it suddenly sounded like a machine powerful enough to swallow everything personal. William then offered to delay public confirmation. Charlotte refused, but she asked for one promise instead. George must hear every major decision before the palace heard it. William agreed immediately. He also added a private family clause to the plan, requiring decisions about joint duties to be discussed with George, Charlotte, and Louis whenever their ages allowed them to understand. "You are allowed to change your mind," William told her. Then Charlotte's answer came simple and absolute. "Then I choose to help him." So now the palace says it is official. Charlotte is guardian of the crown, charged with support, training, and authority built around emergency needs. And the announcement arrived on a day when the household fought over timing. The public didn't just receive news, they received a signal. Here's what matters now. Not the title, not the photo angles, not the carefully worded phrasing that BBC anchors can deliver with steady voices. What matters is the internal resistance that tried to delay it. Resistance doesn't happen for no reason. It happens when power is about to shift. It happens when someone realizes the monarchy's emotional structure is about to change. And once the structure changes, the politics changes, the calendar changes, the security changes, the sibling dynamic changes. In the hours since the announcement, polls began to form. Not official ones yet, but the kind of fast-turn sentiment trackers that journalists love because they refresh every minute. Comment sections filled with triads and slogans, as if people could reduce family complexity into slogans. Experts on morning programs argued about whether the title is modernization or overreach. A legal commentator from a parliamentary-adjacent think tank said, cautiously, that recognition of roles can clarify responsibilities, while another historian countered that such roles can also inflate expectations. Meanwhile, royal watchers on X and Instagram dissected Charlotte's posture during the announcement like body language can forecast constitutional crises. They noticed she did not smile. They noticed her grip. They noticed Catherine's glance to William, then the way William refused to show panic, even when the stakes were obvious. Because everyone sees the same thing now. This title was not just granted, it was fought for. And the palace doesn't confirm new titles without anticipating blowback. So if you're wondering why some senior relatives said nothing, it's because silence can be a shield. It can be a refusal to validate the new order. It can also be the beginning of a private campaign. aimed not at reversing the decision, but at limiting its reach. Global institutions are watching too. Diplomats understand that titles translate into who represents the crown abroad. If Charlotte becomes a deputy in emergencies, then other nations will begin asking a quiet question. Who will stand beside the heir when the cameras are not rolling? That question is already being asked behind closed doors, in embassies and international organizations, where protocol becomes politics without anyone saying the word. So here's the cliff edge of this story. The palace has confirmed Charlotte's guardianship. William has insisted it not replace her childhood. Catherine has insisted duty not erase humanity. And yet the world is already pulling Charlotte into a spotlight she didn't ask for. What happens when the next royal ceremony arrives and the household has to perform unity under pressure? What happens if someone inside the court tries to exploit the